Well. Welcome to this Shelter and Love episode 14. I have a dear friend here, Kiran Mani. So before I talk about Kiran, I just want to talk about how this series came into play. You all asked for it. Simple as that. When we went into quarantine, when we went into lockdown because of COVID-19, people reached out and asked me and says, can you provide some spiritual support? Can you provide some community? And I said, why not? So I did a series for 15 days called Living Well, and you guys liked it and didn't want me to stop and said, so the second part of it, I wanted to make it not just about me, but this amazing group of friends I've surrounded myself with. And I wanted to give them a chance to speak to my friends here online from different parts of the world. So everybody, wherever you're joining from, very welcome. Kiran, welcome to this conversation. I just want to give a quick introduction to who Kiran is. Kiran is a dear brother. We've had parallel paths and our own spiritual progression. He's seen me go through my highs and my lows. And he's one of those guys. He's just such a dear friend. Yesterday, we were talking about that safe person where you can be who you are, completely be heard and seen without being judged and without being resented, without necessarily any advice coming in from the other person. And Kiran's that kind of person. It's a gift. It's a gift to have a brother like this on the path. And we are going to hear from a VP of Google. So besides all of that, he's got incredible street credibility. He is very, very humble. You will see that as he speaks. He's one of those guys. He's managing director of retail at Google, but not just at Google. His emotional intelligence has been recognized across the industry. And he goes to speak both at police departments and at companies and schools and everything in between. And his form of leadership has been truly something that the world needs more of, a heart-based conscious leadership paradigm. So with that elaborate introduction, let me kick off the conversation. Kiran, you want to say any opening words?
Jayabhai always has an ability to make people feel like rock stars. So he just proved that again. But on a serious note, thank you so much for having me. And what an amazing idea during these times, I think, which actually leads us to the discussion itself. It's amazing to see how we are all holed up in our bunkers, yet finding such amazing ways to have conversations and stay connected. So thank you for having me over here, Jayabhai.
Absolutely a pleasure, a delight. So first of all, we, as you have mentioned, we are hunkered down. We're in our bunkers, wherever we are, different parts of the world. Now, this is the second episode I've seen in my life, and I would imagine for most of us on this call today, where the world has seen a global event, and this event is reshaping the way we know life on Earth. And it's not just during this lockdown, but I foresee that this will be having ripple effects on how we go back into the normal, if there's such a thing, or maybe the new normal, when this all is over and done. From your perspective, how do you see this world would have changed after this lockdown is lifted?
Thank you for the question, Jayabhai. Obviously, my perspective is colored from the lens of my experiences, and call it there is a bit of a recency bias to it too, because at Google I have been part of the team that leads the rebound out of the COVID crisis. So we've been having a lot of conversations with global leaders around public policy changes that are being affected. So some of my observations are primarily driven by that. But to your question that you asked, even though this pandemic is new to us for our generation, pandemics are not new to mankind. In fact, pandemics have shaped in a lot of ways how human history has been. They say that the two most influential things in terms of building society have been wars and pandemics. It sounds a bit depressing, but it is true that in a lot of ways, they say that the Asian way of greeting, which is doing a namaste, actually is an outcome of a pandemic, where during those days, people did not want to get in touch with each other. And it's interesting to see how that is kind of making a comeback, even in the corporate world these days. So yes, I mean, while this is unsettling, deeply unsettling for a lot of us, one of the things that the world has taught us, or history has taught us, is pandemics always reshape civilizations and reshapes history. In my view, one of the biggest changes that I'm noticing with this pandemic is how our digital and physical lives are truly getting intermingled in a way that you cannot separate them. While we are all, it's really amazing to see that while work should have completely come to a grinding halt, while it is inconvenient that we're all working from home, in a lot of ways, even conversations like these have been made possible. Intermingling is still made possible because of technology, which has come in. I'm also noticing now that how technology is no longer a millennial phenomenon or something which is meant for a particular generation. It's amazing to see how people who are, our parents, generations whom we thought were digitally not so savvy, are figuring out. My dad now has 3 types of communication tools established on his computer. He's great with WhatsApp, he's great with Zoom, he's great on others. And it's all happened in the last 3 weeks. And in a lot of ways, I think that is, in my mind, is going to be the biggest outcome coming out of this pandemic. That we are all going to be so much more comfortable living digital and physical lives in an intermingled way. We talked about that future a lot in the world that I come from, but I think it's becoming a reality. And I'll close it out with a very simple example that we all see: grocery purchase. No matter what you do, we always thought that you could shop for a lot of things online, but when it comes to grocery, whether it is the Indian store, whether it's a Costco visit, you still make a visit. I think that's the biggest change that I have seen personally, and I'm hearing my colleagues talk about how, because of the pandemic, they have become so much more adept at online ordering and bringing things home, that the same grocery purchase suddenly seems to have become a list, and you call out the list and you are able to get those things delivered at home. So I do feel that this pandemic will make people actually come closer in many, many ways, while we are asked to live apart.
Right. Beautifully said. Beautifully said. So talking about coming closer while apart is a big item of discussion right now. As you know, it is at the heart of all political decisions and the future of our existence. I mean, really. So there is the people who are the doctors, the medical faculty, that are suggesting that the
Here comes the little one.
yeah, so she's a dear friend, by the way. Hi, Mishku. Yes, okay, that was a quick visit. Yeah, we are very good friends. There's those of you watching on, Mishku and I can play for hours and not worry about anything happening in the world. So anyway, coming back to my question, this idea of okay, I'll wait for you.
Go ahead, Jai, I can hear you.
Yeah, so the idea of staying shelter in place and opening up, right? There is this big debate, and we understand people are going nuts being in the thing, and then, many people have lost jobs, losing, growing hair, coloring hair, all kinds of issues are coming up, versus, what the medical faculty is telling us. From your place, or from your vantage point, how do you see? You are a man of data. You are a guy who represents a company that collects the world's wisdom information. Talk about that for a second, please.
Sure, Jai. With you can have all the data in the world, but you can't take humanity out of people, isn't it? So, there's all right. Sure. Can you now please close that door and ensure that you don't disturb us? Thank you, Mishku. Close the door, please. Behind you. This has become a way of life, Jai, by the way. This isn't just an occurrence in today's meeting. It's interesting to see that this has become the way we conduct businesses too. There are so many of my colleagues, while they are in the middle of their conversations, they are either feeding their kids. I'm on a global job. So you can see that sometime when it is morning for me, it's lunchtime with somebody else, and somebody's busy cooking while having the conversations. So there was a time when these things used to perturb me, that when such disturbances happen, I will get very conscious about it. And now it's amazing. That's another thing coming out of the pandemic, that personal and professional life seem to have blended. You don't get affected by this anymore. So, but on the question that you asked me, I do feel that in a lot of ways that, you know, there is a saying which says that you can make a living only if you are alive. And in a lot of ways, I've seen that in play today. Well, there's a lot of push towards, and I'm not here to question the the logic behind whether businesses should open or not. Obviously, a lot of care will be taken around why they should open, when they should open. However, there are two aspects of being alive, isn't it? One is the aspect of life and death, which this pandemic has. I would say that lots of governments can impose a lot of decisions, but it's a deeply personal choice to come back and say, hey, how much care I take. It's interesting to see how people in some parts of the world are protesting against the current way of locking down. And I come back and say, yeah, you can protest, you cannot protest. But I do feel that society and laws can only do that much in terms of controlling human beings. Should we choose to do something against the law, comes down to personal choice. So how we react to this environment, if we choose to lock ourselves down, if we choose to say that our health is important, no matter what the rules are, we will take care, we will do things based on our research, our understanding. But I think the more important thing that is coming out, which most people are ignoring during this pandemic, is the issues that mental health is causing. I actually do think today that we lose 3 times more lives to mental health problems than the actual pandemic itself. In a way, that is the pandemic that has spread much more than the coronavirus. We talk about 1 million cases of coronavirus in the US. I will guarantee you there are 10 million plus cases of deep mental health issues that have cropped up in the same amount of time. And in my view, that's the alive part that I talk about, that you can make a living only when you are alive. And I have seen that as some of the most differentiating aspects of people on calls, that it isn't just about the fact of staying at home, but some of them have the ability to be alive, to bring people along during these moments with their positivity, with how their outlook on life, how they think about with deep sense of gratitude. So to me, that's been the biggest learning, that even in moments of crisis, you actually look up to people who have a smile on their face and who are able to see the world through a very positive lens.
So, that's an interesting thing that you're talking about. Okay, I understand those people who have that wherewithal to take people with them in the positive trajectory. But what you shared to me is very perplexing, in that being alive requires quarantine, which I think is very clear. But then quarantine raises mental health issues. And you said that that's part of the alive. So it's almost like on two ends of that decision to stay. So if you stay quarantined, you may be physically alive, but mentally sick.
Yes.
So what, in your opinion, is a way to navigate this perplexity, this diametrically opposite paradigm?
Jeba, anybody who discovers the ability to find the balance between those two paradigms is a soul which has already attained nirvana in many ways. I wouldn't even say that I know that, but you know what? There is definitely somewhere there's a play between greed and gratitude amidst all of this, isn't it? Because I kind of say that even when we had all the opportunity to remain connected, we forget that was just a few weeks ago that we had every opportunity to fly to any part of the world. We could meet people. And yet, in a lot of ways, we actually use those moments to isolate ourselves. I remember in small ways, working from home used to be a treat that I will give myself once every few weeks because I just wanted to stay to myself. And now I wish I could have a treat of actually going to work someday and meeting a few people. So in a lot of ways, I kind of say that many of our thinking, when we have everything around us, tends to be sometimes gets to such a self-centered point that greed can be a word that can be sometimes overexpanded, but I call it simply self-centeredness, that how we forget to appreciate the small things that we have in life. While all of a sudden, when these moments come, it exposes us to saying that, hey, those small things are so valuable. You only realize their value when they are not around with us. So, I mean, I kind of feel that in a lot of ways, we are all realizing our points of greed and gratitude. And in some way, the shelter is, I hope that, the mental health aspect is, I hope we don't get back into being too self-centered. If we can keep ourselves centered around the gratitude of even having opportunities like this to connect, it's the small moments of joy that keeps us centered and that keeps us alive.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think you're absolutely right. I think several things that you've said. One is that the trajectory of us going more digital is happening. The trajectory of us going towards, we wished we had more time. We're getting that. And I completely agree that let us use this time to recognize what of my attitude has been of greed and what parts of my gratitude should I celebrate right now and enhance that. Yes, I completely agree that this is really, I think we've gotten to this place because we have never checked ourselves.
Yes.
We went just endlessly towards thinking that there's a consumption we could do as if there is no end to resources available. So talking of which, see, you are a person that's very well respected in the leadership space, and especially in the Silicon Valley, and of course now globally. And you're taking up a position that's going to be heading Asia Pacific for your business. What are some suggestions? What are some tips, or maybe your own personal realization as being a leader for quite a while at Google, that leaders need to take away from this crisis and try to keep up front and center as they navigate through difficult decisions? There are going to be a lot of difficult decisions in this situation and going forward.
Thank you, Jaibai. Jaibai, there are the aspects which I feel is, in a lot of ways, sometimes leadership is made into the subject that it is a privilege of a few, while the others are meant to be followers. I actually feel that in many cases, it's roles that all of us play. Yeah, there is a leader in all of us. And there are moments to lead, and there are moments to manage, and there are moments to follow, right? And it's a question to come back and say, how do you understand what are those moments to lead? For example, even at home over here, there is a very clear leadership pattern. You know that better than I do, as to who is the leader at home. And, it definitely is my life partner. And it is something which, if you understand that, and if you do that with graciousness, you actually find that you are able to. So you don't have to lead in every moment in your life. Sometimes not leading allows you that there are many aspects of your life that just gets done because somebody else has taken the position of leadership. So I do kind of make that point to say, hey, not everyone needs to lead at all moments, and not everyone, has to say that I am there. It's leadership is not meant for a select few. So it applies to all walks of life. It allows to all situations. And what I have found is, many times that's asked, so what are the elements where you actually show leadership? And I found that in a lot of ways, it boils down to three things. Number one, it talks about, when a particular moment like the crisis hits, you actually look to people who have resources. And resources does not necessarily mean money. Resources even include people like you, that if at this moment, if I am finding myself mentally not aligned, I look for resources, people who have something in abundance to give during this time. Some people have money. Some people have mental support. Some people have the physical ability. There are caretakers. So resources become a very important aspect of leadership, that you have to have the resources to be able to give during this time. The second aspect, which I found that in any aspect where leadership comes to play, is there are some people who just don't have resources, but also have the ability to realign the situation. That whenever a crisis like this hits, you know that the previous ways of doing things will not help you. What got us here won't get us there. And how do you actually, there are few of us who have the gift of realignment during this moment, where you can take something and you actually see a new pattern and say, you know what, in future, you probably have to think about it differently. Now, you may have the resources and you may have the realignment. Yet, with all those, even with those two coming together, you may still get it wrong. And the chances of you getting it wrong, especially when you are charting a new path, are very high, which is where I think the third element comes in, which is an element of deep trust. That at the time of rebounding out of any crisis, trust becomes a very important aspect. That as a leader, you are able to bring out the trust of another human being. You might be a caretaker, you might be a person at home, you might be in a corporate environment. But have you built, this is where credibility comes in, that over a period of time, people say, even if things go wrong, it is much better following this leader in this moment of crisis. And in my view, leadership happens. So leadership is about bringing change. Management is about bringing in order. So whenever there is an element of leading change, I have found that these three elements start to interplay with each other. People who have deep resources, people who have the ability to realign it. But most importantly, even if things go wrong, they have the trust to say that people will actually give them the forgiveness even when things go wrong.
Beautiful. I love what you said. Leadership is about leading change. Management is about managing control.
Bringing order. Yeah.
Yeah, order. Yeah, correct. Yeah. So I think that right there is so much depth in that, just to even, like you said, we all are leaders in so many ways at different times of the day, in different contexts, in different arenas. And how much trust do we evoke amongst those people, whoever that community is, whether it's home or community, whatever it is, that people are saying, okay, nobody knows what is going to be the right thing to do, but we trust where this person is taking us or the decisions that he or she is making on our behalf. That is a very profound thing. With that, Kiran, I would like for you to please lead us into an alignment exercise.
Thank you, Jay Bhai. May I ask all of you to please close your eyes? Take a moment to settle down. Bring your attention inward. Make sure that your breathing is normal. Check. Are you comfortable? Are you at ease? Are you at peace? What is it that you are deeply grateful for? Can we pause and thank all those who made those moments of gratitude possible? And how is that gratitude making us alive? How is it seeding the tree of fulfillment? How do we go through this pandemic without just being, without just living? How can we use gratitude to be alive? And when our cups are full, what can we pour to others? How can we give so that we get more? What is the change that we want to see around us? And how can I be the instrument that brings that change? What is the gift that I can pour to make that change possible? And how does that change make us more alive? Because the only change that matters is what happens inside me. How do we change ourselves? How do we count our blessings? How do we surround ourselves with goodness, gratitude, and giving? And gently bring your focus back to your breath. And whenever you feel ready, bring the focus back to this group of us. And let's be grateful to each other for this moment of beauty, peace, tranquility, and contemplation. Let us be grateful to each other for giving us this moment of beauty and this moment to pause. Thank you, Jai.
Thank you, Kiran Bhai. This is beautiful. Given, I don't think everybody knows this, but this is your first public long meditation that you've led. Welcome to this world. Many more to come, many more to come. This is beautiful. You're able to see this is, you are an example of holding those two, seemingly opposite ends of the spectrum in one being. That is the absolute analytical world of measure, business and competence and, growing market share and aggressiveness. And at the same time, deep centeredness and compassion and gratitude, like you beautifully demonstrated. Thank you so much. And this is...
I appreciate everybody on the call to be patient as I walked through my very first guided meditation. I've always had Jai drive those meditations. Even a few minutes before the call, I was telling him, I'm not sure I can guide 50 people. And thanks to you for asking me to say it's a safe space. Let's try it out. But I would say it definitely felt good.
Very good. That's the ultimate metrics, right? How you feel about it. Fantastic. Folks, now it's your turn to ask questions. I'm going to take in questions. I'm already seeing some come in. So the very first question I see here is, where do you think the retail and technology world is heading as an aftermath of this pandemic? Who will survive and who will not, and why?
Thank you for that question. Look, I think, it's interesting to see that the only thing that this pandemic has done is put a pause to our greed. All our needs are getting met. And, we talk about a global economic meltdown just because we have all decided to live a life where our basic needs are being met. So, I mean, that the question about retail, there are two aspects to it. There is a business angle to retail where it's, irrespective of which part of retail you are in, retail as an industry in any market is the number one or number two employer for that particular marketplace. To that extent, it's a huge provider of livelihood. And that is the part which has been really interesting, Jaybai, that unlike the industries that drive, it's not the tech industry or the finance industry that normally drives the stock market. The industries that have been very highly affected by this pandemic are the ones which affect the livelihood of the common man. Healthcare, retail, and these have been some of the most affected segments. We talk about travel, but in a lot of countries, tourism is a very, very big industry, which is a huge employer. So what we don't realize is, as we speak today, over 100 million people in the US, which is a third of the US population, is without jobs or without, the economic impact is deeply felt there. Yet our stock markets are about maybe 10% off from their all-time highs. And I find it very difficult to reconcile those two aspects, saying that what is the true measure of economic prosperity? Is it the stock markets, or is it the fact that all of us are living good quality of life? I would say that as consumers of retail products, retail will continue. It's an industry which cannot go down because all of us will have our needs. However, I do feel that the two aspects of retail that will change, and I don't know how much of that impact will be, is how retail is consumed, from stores to digital areas. There will be a shift for sure. And to that extent, there will be a shift of the workforce too, from manning tellers and cashiers and people who are in stores to people who are much more in the businesses of logistics, picking and packing. So in a lot of ways, as the thing which is not visible to the human eye is how an entire population of white-collar workers are actually getting completely retrained on their basic skills. So that's, in my view, one of the things that will happen now, that how consumer behaviors shift, what will be considered as employment and employment opportunities will also shift.
Excellent. The next question is from Melissa, and the question is, do you think that in the near future, we will all be required to have a chip implanted?
I wish I don't get to see that live, but look, in a lot of ways, there are many people who preach the benefits of it. There is, in fact, there are already enough studies being done where having a small chip implanted underneath your eye can actually monitor 26 vital signals of your body on a permanent basis, whereby you can not only control, there's a very interesting, I was in a lecture from a very celebrated doctor who's a doctor and a technologist, both combined. And he was actually giving scientific reasons as to why the next generation on Earth will live way beyond 150 years of living. He didn't say alive. And one of the reasons why he says is our ability to proactively manage health signals. So, and it's interesting in the context of the epidemic, he was speaking that he was using three words. There are epidemics, there are, I forget the other two words, but essentially what he was saying is there are virus-driven diseases like the epidemic that we are having. Then there are body diseases which are caused because you hurt yourself, or you have had an accident and your bones break. But then he was talking about there are some diseases which affect all parts of your body. Like, for example, if you have a sugar problem or a blood pressure problem, those are things which they call as silent killers. So having a chip underneath you can actually help you control and proactively manage silent killers, which actually cause so many more diseases within you. So again, it's not something which I personally feel very comfortable with. Jaybai, I think you logged off and you had to log in again, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right. But just to say that, it's just to say it is a reality which is, I don't think it's a question of if, it's a question of when. But on a personal note, it is something which I keep asking to then what extent can we have those invasions into our body, and to what extent do we don't want to let our own intuition and immune system be controlled by devices which we have founded.
Right. This, by the way, so there were some other questions, Diksha and some other people. I lost those questions because my machine suddenly kicked me out. So please retype. Meanwhile, while they retype the questions, do you have the questions on your screen?
I saw, I'm trying to see it, Jaybai, here.
The Q&A tab.
Diksha was not a question. Her point was Mishku is so cute, and I wanted to say thank you. And her son Yash is 4 as well. So Mishku is turning 5 in 2 days' time. So it's about the same age.
Yeah.
And Shivani's comment was 14 crore people have lost their jobs in India. That is true, Shivani. And I think we haven't seen the worst of that yet. While the pandemic can get over, but the economic impact and the impact of livelihoods is still, is still a long way from being solved.
Right. So I have a question, back to the chip and the thing, there was something very interesting. So you and I were chatting some months ago, and you mentioned that thing that the executive editor, the chief editor of Wired magazine demonstrated how having a cell phone with you, even when it is turned off. So that was, please go ahead and state that. And I want to bring it up from the perspective that you don't need to have a chip implanted into your body, but you're being tracked because of the gadgets that you're carrying. Can you talk about that? That was pretty stellar, that episode that you shared with me.
Jaybai, it's the duality that we all live in. And one of the dualities that I live in at Google is, while a lot of data is useful, is I keep asking myself how much of the data is invasive and how much of that invasion is good. In some way, there were times where weaponry used to be the thing that differentiated, how conquest used to happen. The biggest weapon in today's world is data. How much I know about another person can actually determine how much I control the other person. In a lot of ways, the information today is in the hands of people who want to do good with it. But how do we assume and presume that everyone and anyone who touches the data has the same intentions? We are already seeing cases of how countries are fighting wars with each other now using information, how they are influencing decision-making in other places because of information and poor information. And I think to that extent, to your point, which you were saying, becomes deeply personal too. That even when you have, what Jaybai was referring to was the editor of Wired is a good friend of mine. And he actually did this experiment himself to say that he had a phone which was fully switched off, completely switched off. And I won't get into the technical details of it. He actually kept it with him for 3 days. And after that, he gave the phone to one of his testers. And when the phone was switched on, the phone had actually tracked about 300 plus locations that he had been to a measure of 5 feet apart. And this is a completely switched off phone. Whether we like it or not, we are surrounded with sensors, and we have allowed ourselves to be tracked to an extent which I don't believe we have the ability to retract it now, right? There is so much more information about us that is available there. For a good example for that is, if someone willfully, Jaybai, today wants to hack into our credits and into our financial situations, no matter how many data protections that you have, they can. And that's a world of vulnerability that we all live in. Now, you can be perturbed by it. You can implant another chip within you to control what happens because of all that perturbing, or at the moment control your controllables. And I do feel that at this point of time, the one thing which is within our control is to ensure that we don't actually overwhelm ourselves with that much amount of data. There is a chip within us, which is our own intuition. If we can fine tune that chip, it can give us far more than any other chip being implanted in our body.
Right. Excellent. So I've got a few more questions. Let's see. The next one, Diksha, thank you for typing this again. How do you take care of Mishku while working? How do you manage screen time? Now it's getting real.
I wish I knew the answers to it. But look, I think, again, Jaybai knows this. We haven't had a proper television at home for now over 10 years, I should say. So one of the things that coincided with our meditation practice has been we cut the cord. So I wouldn't say that we don't have a dumb terminal called TV. However, we try to be careful not to over surround ourselves. It is a reality that even having these conversations have to be on a screen. So there is no escaping a screen today. Education for our kids has now come on screens. But what we do try to do is at least as much of information and entertainment, what we consume doesn't have to be in front of a screen. So we try to entertain ourselves. We try to exercise ourselves as a family together, which, by the way, I would say has been one of the most beautiful personal outcomes for me from this pandemic, has been the time that I've gotten with my kids. I kind of feel that I have rediscovered my bond, even with my 8 and 5-year-old, because I realized that what I earlier defined as time with my kids was actually taking them from one activity to the other. It was more logistics management. And I felt, hey, I'm taking them for a swim class or an art class. And versus now I'm teaching my 8-year-old, and I realize I have a whole new level of appreciation for class teachers now. The level of patience required, all this facade comes off very, very quickly as soon as I start teaching my daughter period tables and whatnot. But also, we now eat together, we exercise together, we walk together, we see each other into our eyes. And I can see much more than me. My daughters appreciate that a lot. They sit in front of a TV when they are bored. But when they are active, when they are occupied, they actually don't want a TV. If I give my daughters a choice between, can I come and play with them? And you want to watch TV, they always choose playing. And I think that has been the big learning for me, saying that the one way to avoid TV is to become a friend and make them long for it. And in some ways, I long for it too. So, interestingly, straight after this call, we are all basically inaugurating the pool for the summer this time. It's our first jump in. But that's something they have been excited about. One of the reasons why they've been taking all those papers and others, as you see Mishku come and go, is because she's been preparing for it. But yes, it's about how much you allow these devices to control you versus use them for your benefit.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Next question is from Catherine. She's asking, do you think this time is helping us to recall and reconsider relying upon ways of self-reliant lifestyles that served us well in the past? Perhaps the opposite of a chip managing our health.
I think thanks for the question. I think I answered that. Again, it's a very deeply personal choice. I do feel that all those chips and technologies are required for a certain kind of people for whom their health is beyond their control. There is, in a lot of ways, the progress that mankind is making because of all the data and the tech available today for the medical industry is phenomenal. And it is helping a whole bunch of people for whom their health is beyond their control. But for many of us who have the ability to live full lives with all our senses and all our health factors in place, I do feel that we can probably avoid the eventuality of having a chip implanted within us. And a lot of that is where, in my personal learning, that's the difference between greed and gratitude. So yeah, I think what the pandemic is teaching us, to the question that was asked, is it's teaching us to live within our needs and be grateful for it, versus always trying to fulfill our greed.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And I have another question. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to focus on gratitude. In thought of the elderly community or those who have limited access, how can they be supported if our primary access to one another and resources require technology use?
Jay Bhai, that has been one of my, I've had personal experiences of at least 3 to 4 of my colleagues whose parents have been very badly affected during this time. In fact, one of my colleagues lost her father to COVID, and he lives exactly an hour away from the Bay Area. And given the current situation, she could not even go down to visit him.
Wow.
And they had to, dispose the body of without actually even having the near and dear of the family even go anywhere near. So yes, we have seen that is the aspect of grief that accompanies all this. It is not, I don't think I have an answer to it. But what I have found is, at least the least that we can do is, the ability of technology is to ensure that we use these moments to connect. In my own case, I think I probably did not appreciate how much I needed my near and dears, including my parents. Now we have conversations and chats every 2 or 3 days because technology enables it. So in a lot of ways, from a psychological aspect, we have come closer thanks to technology because we have the time for it now. But the physiological difficulties that people face are untold. And I don't think I have an answer to it, but it is something which I see having hit us. Another colleague of mine is down with stage 4 cancer, and going to a hospital itself has become such a difficult task because your immune system is bad. And all you can do in these moments is send them good vibes and good prayers.
Yes. So thank you very much. This has been very deeply insightful. So you talk about the physiological aspects, you talk about the technological aspects. As a closing comment, would you like to offer one suggestion for us to keep our mental well-being, which I think you alluded to, that there's a potential ticking time bomb there. And so you mentioned about having a person going to a personal resource. So if I turn to you for a resource there on the mental well-being front, what would you recommend?
Jai, as soon as you said this, I wasn't prepared with an answer, but something that you have mentioned in the past comes to my mind. Many a times when we are hit with a crisis, we try to rationalize it. We use our brain to think through situations. And that's the brain that normally goes to data, tries to read up facts. Yes, we need all that data, we need all that facts. But I feel in a moment of crisis like this, the first thing that we all do is we feel. We feel a crisis. And that, in a lot of ways, is our heart brain. or what we call as our intuition. One of the things that I have been trying to focus on is how do we basically guard, or how do we harness our intuitions and our heart brain, which in a lot of ways I have found that, even in our workplaces, it is amazing how 95% of decisions that are taken are people who are rationalizing their emotions. If you are in a good state of mind, you look at the same set of data and you come to an entirely different outcome. While when you are perturbed, or when you're angry, or when you're distracted, or when the mood of a particular conversation is driven by one-upmanship and you trying to get the better of another person, I think that is the only thing which is within our control these days, that if we can keep our compassion levels high, we talk about this as compassion, gratitude, all lots of positive emotions. But I find that every one of those things that we do is a way to feed and hone our heart brain or our intuition. And when that gets stronger, I have found that it leads the way. In a lot of ways, our first reaction, and it is very well documented in books too, that our first reaction to anything is our feeling. And it is then that our rationalization kicks in. If we are able to basically make our first reaction into something positive, when our brain kicks in, which is a very important thinking ability apparatus that we have, but we do it with the right frame of mind. So I don't think even though I say this, I will be the first person to acknowledge, I don't think I've completely internalized it, but the effort is on to say that, how do I take something which is far more powerful than my thinking capacity that is already inbuilt in me? How do I bring some science or some semblance of control on it so that I can actually control better destinies and better outcomes?
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you very much, Kiran Bhai. It was just a joy, as always. We could go on forever, but I know you have a thing coming up in the 2 minutes. I just want to say real quick that tomorrow is the last episode. I have Dr. Richard Miller, who's going to be joining us on this. He is the founder of iRest, a global expert in Yoga Nidra, and he's actually going to lead us through a Yoga Nidra, which is a very powerful technique for mental well-being, especially those of you who are struggling with sleep. I just want to say that you do not want to miss tomorrow's session. So same time, same channel. Until then, be safe, be in safe social distancing, or socially connected, but physical distancing. And thank you so much again. Be well.
See you all. Bye.